Today, we're diving into a story that will resonate with anyone who's faced a seemingly insurmountable challenge and wondered if there's a way through. Imagine being in a position where a simple task, like opening a medication bottle, becomes a daily struggle for someone you love. How far would you go to solve that problem? In this episode, we're joined by Rocky Batzel, the CEO, founder, and inventor of SnapSlide, a revolutionary child-resistant closure that tackles this very issue. Rocky's journey from medical student to groundbreaking inventor is filled with emotional highs and frustrating lows. But most importantly, it's packed with valuable lessons for every aspiring entrepreneur out there. One burning question we'll answer today: how do you maintain unwavering commitment and navigate endless obstacles when everyone around you says it can't be done? Stay tuned, because Rocky's story is not just about innovation, it's about overcoming challenges with determination and heart. As always, if you found value from this content, please like and subscribe. And now here's my conversation with Rocky Batzel. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Beyond Fulfillment podcast. I'm your host, Dave Goulis, and this week my guest is the CEO, founder, and the inventor of SnapSlide, Rocky Batzel. Welcome, Rocky.
What's up, Dave? Good to be here, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining the show. If you could, for everyone, can you tell us what SnapSlide is and how it came to be?
SnapSlide is a new type of child-resistant closure, a new mechanical operation to allow access to medications, along with a variety of other things that requires a lot less force and dexterity to operate. You can operate with one hand. So kind of a paradigm shift in child-resistant closures.
Okay. And when did you invent SnapSlide?
Several years back, about 7 years ago. It's been a journey. I invented it. I was a medical student. I left medical school to pursue entrepreneurial ventures. Just took a wild leap into the unknown. And my mother came to me and was like, "Rock, you want to invent something? Invent something for these bottles. Graham can't get into them." My mom would have to go over twice a week, open all her medication bottles, and then she'd leave the cap on them. And so what would happen? Graham would knock them over, pills go all over the place. She gets paranoid when the grandkids come over, so she has to put them back on, and the whole process starts all over again. And I said, that's interesting. So I started looking and realized that child-resistant closures have not changed in over 50 years, since 1974. And it's always some mechanical operation that requires a push and turn or squeeze and turn, some sort of torque, which requires a lot of force and dexterity. And you obviously need two hands to do it. So I'm a big research guy, and I started talking to people, and it's found that there's a general consensus that nobody really likes these things. People, the older you get, you lose strength, you lose dexterity, and you struggle with it. And if you have one arm after a stroke, 80% of people have some form of hemiparesis after a stroke, amputees, neuromuscular disorders. There's a smorgasbord of disabilities that prohibit you from using both hands. So, and they find it virtually impossible to open them. So I set out on this mission to kind of revolutionize CR packaging and provide more accessibility to those who struggle with these things.
Wow. Okay. So you're in med school and you leave, and then you knew you were going to be an entrepreneur, but you didn't know specifically what at that time when you left med school. Is that right?
Correct. Yep. I didn't know what I was going to do. I knew I was going to do something. I knew I'd figured it out. I played around, did a couple things, started a couple businesses, invented a couple things, cold calling companies, and I figured out the way of how it's done. So it's about maybe 18 months of just this limbo period of just playing, figuring it out, until my mom came to me and I had this moment of, this is the thing. So I started pursuing it then. It was a grind, you never know. No different than most entrepreneurial stories. You jumping into the unknown. You don't know what to do, how to do. You just got to learn every step of the way and never give up.
Yeah, that's great advice for sure. Okay, so your mom comes to you with this, hey, why don't you invent this? Because that's going to help Graham. But clearly, right, that packaging hadn't changed in 50 years. Sure, there's reasons for that, right? And you have this aha moment. But what was the process like of how to figure out like a new way to do something that had been done the same way for so long?
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to help my Graham, have something that requires less force and dexterity. And obviously pushing and turning something, that torque requires a lot of muscle and joint movement. So maybe my medical background from medical school kind of came into play. And I'm like, all right, so I need something that requires less force and dexterity, but yet it needs to be simple. Everybody like younger guys, everybody's in my generation pursuing more like sophisticated tech, artificial intelligence, all this complicated, fancy stuff. And I'm more of a simple guy. I wanted to create something really simple and tangible, something cold. So that's probably what made me interested in prescription bottles or CR closures, because they're simple. So I knew it needed to be simple, a lot of scale, a lot of volume, low price point. So you can't make it really more complicated. You're kind of forced to stay in that simple lane. What really opened my eyes to kind of outside the box was when I went to a local wine and spirit store, which is Pennsylvania's liquor stores. So I went into this wine and spirit store, and now, mind you, I'm thinking child-resistant closures, like how to do it. What do we do here with these caps? And I walked in, and I saw a lady there sampling wines. She was handing out samples, and she was an amputee. She only had one arm. And I was like, whoa, how does she open bottles? And I kind of forgot even what I was buying. And I went into this aisle so I could keep an eye on her to see how she opens these things, how she opens the corks on the bottles. And she had her technique, but it was cumbersome. And I said at that point, I'm like, okay, whatever I create needs to be one arm accessible. It's almost like I don't want to do it if I can't figure out a way to have a one arm accessible. And that's probably what led me to go outside the box. Instead of a torque motion, a linear, something press and slide instead of pushing and turning. I knew you need a two-part mechanism for the child resistance, push and turn or squeeze and turn. So you need to meet all these criteria, the things that needed to be child resistant. So what's one aspect of the child resistance is a two-part mechanism. So I incorporated that in there, but instead of a turning something, linear. And that kind of, once I had that, then I was able to put it all together in my mind and create a very simple mechanical operation that doesn't revolve torque, but a linear operation, which uses a lot less force and dexterity, and you could open it with one arm.
Okay. So it's almost like you'd hold it, press it down with your thumb, and then slide it back. That type of motion?
Exactly. It's tough to do it on video, but so I have the bottle here, and it looks like cylindrical standard prescription bottle. And I got to this design. It originally had a cube, which the geometry of a cube is so much better than a cylinder. So you're able to pack so many more in a box. It's crazy, the geometric efficiencies. So that was the first iteration, was a cube design. And learning the industry, finally figure out, okay, it's crazy, Dave, that people, they don't like change. The status quo. So when you're inventing something, and I've learned this the hard way, try to stay as close to what they know as possible to start. So I had to do a complete redesign and put SnapSlide on a cylinder, even though a cube is geometrically better. Want to keep it as streamlined as possible and not go too crazy in terms of the design, just close to what they know. So same mechanical operation, instead of pushing and turning this thing, you press it in the exact spot and you just slide it open.
Ah, okay.
And then slide it closed. So the cap not only requires a lot less dexterity to open, also a lot less to close. I found interesting that a lot of people don't put the caps on properly. That's a lot of reasons why kids get into medications, not so much that they're in the closure, but because we don't put it on right. Whether it's we don't feel like taking it off again, like my gram, or you just miss the threads. And then if you miss the threads, it goes on kind of cockeyed, and then kid just pops it off. So I wanted that not only easy to open, but also easy to close as well.
Okay. And so when you had this idea to do this, you had your aha moment. How long did it take you to get the actual finished product completed?
Years, a long time. But there's like when you come up with something, you're always moving forward. You know, first you start out, you need to find the engineers. You know, because I'm not an engineer by trade. So how do I, okay, I have this idea. How do I get it to actual something you could hold to be able to test it? And I finally found the right engineers to do it. You take a beating along the way. A lot of people, it can't be done. You can never be molded, can never be manufactured. You know, a lot of people tell you that it can't be done. Nobody gave me a real reason for that. And that's probably why I'm pretty stubborn, I guess you could say. If you don't give me a real reason that I could wrap my head around, I have to prove it myself. You know, so I had a lot of people telling me that until you find the right people come into your world that have the vision and see it, and you work with them. And we finally got it. First, we just a 3D print. You know, we got it engineered up and get a 3D model. And then you work the 3D model out as much as possible until you gotta, okay, now we gotta produce an actual plastic part, exactly how it's gonna be produced in the production world, real life thing. 3D prints are great, but there's restrictions on what you could do in terms of how it is, plastic wise, functionality wise, versus the actual product that's going to be in production. But it's a great process to hone in on certain technical parameters until you come as close as you can. So you have to bite the bullet and build a mold, which is an injection. That's how you make anything plastic is made by an injection molding machine. So you need to build that injection mold machine to be able to produce the final plastic part. So we did multiple iterations on once we got to that stage. You never know how it's going to be run off the mold. So you get it, your first samples are not great. You know, there's issues with them. You know, whenever you invent something, there's no textbook that you're like, all right, this is the force you want to use. This is the tolerances, these are the clearances, all these micro elements. You don't know. You know, there's nothing that says this is how it's going to be and it'll work. So a lot of trial and error, a lot of parts coming up the mold that just aren't functioning. And you're like, all right, what do we have to do? Back to the drawing board. We got to increase the force here. We got to decrease it there. More molds, you know, until you finally figure out everything that doesn't work. And then you hone in on the thing that does. And you finally get it. Tenacity. That's the key.
Are you tired of juggling a million tasks? Fiverr can help. Find talented freelancers for everything from logo design and social media marketing to video editing and voiceover work. It's easy, affordable, and a game changer for entrepreneurs. Use the code BEYOND10 for 10% off your first order. Visit Fiverr.com today and level up your business. Yeah, for sure. And the journey you just described definitely takes tenacity. But let me just ask you, so you're a new entrepreneur on this journey. You have this aha moment and this desire to really invent this new product in an industry that hasn't changed. And like you said, it's a years long journey. You're going through this trial and error and setbacks and people telling you it can't be done and so much uncertainty, right? Around, is it going to work? And what, how's it going to turn out? Like, how did you sustain yourself on this journey, given, the uncertainty and everything that you dealt with?
Believe in yourself, finding the right people that also believe, and those wins along the way. You know, everybody that told me it can't be molded, when I got my first mold, even though it wasn't perfect, I still proved that it could be molded and still work. You know, I knew there was still work to be done, but I was able to, check that box that, oh, it could be molded. So those people that told me it couldn't be, they were wrong, you know? And then at that stage, people telling me other things that couldn't be done. If they were wrong before, maybe they're going to be wrong this time. You know, it's just the wins along the way, getting it in the hands of people. You know, you, like the consumers out there, you meet somebody that only has one arm. You know, you struggle with pillows. Yeah, I hate them. You give them a SnapSlide and it just makes their lives easier and more independent. I mean, you see like the smile it puts on their face that they actually do something that they don't have to depend on somebody else to do. Like it's a huge motivational factor. You know, when you see that you're actually helping people make one person's life better, it's a win. It keeps the wind at the back.
And so this whole thing started with a very personal reason to help your grandmother. And, you know, like you said, like this whole desire to help people. Do you think that, you know, having such a personal reason was a big key in, you know, the tenacity and just staying persistent on this journey you've been on?
100%. Like I knew my grandmother had a problem. She couldn't open them. And I knew not only my grandmother had a problem, she couldn't open them, but my mother was having a problem because she'd have to open them for her. You know, so I knew that there was a problem out there. And then when you see, usually that's how a lot of ideas come around. You see people closest to you having a problem and you try to solve that for them. So I knew that there was my grandmother with the problem. So there has to be more grandmothers out there with that problem. You know, the lady in the liquor store, the amputee. Oh, there has to be more amputees out there that struggle. You know, and when I look into the research, there's about 12 million people out there that only have use of one arm. I'm like, wow, that's a big number. So I'm helping them. They need more access. You know, a lot of grandmothers out there. You know, so if I'm helping one, I'm helping a lot. So, and the further you go down the path, I'm a big one talking to people, learning, like, what do you have a problem with? I used to go to grocery stores and just ask random people, hey, well, what do you think about prescription bottles? You know, because everybody uses them. It's one of the most widely used things. So everybody knows what it is. Everybody's using them on a daily basis. So when you bring it up, it's not, they know. I got like, yeah, I hate those things. You know, but it is what it is, and I deal with it, and you know, that's that. And then you give them SnapSlide, you know, when it's during its infancy, just 3D prints, and then they give their 2 cents. They help improve in it. Like I remember being at a grocery store and somebody's like, "Oh, I hate it when the cap falls off." And that's what I'm like, all right, there's another thing that let's incorporate the cap not falling off. You know, and you kind of learn these things from people.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Talking to people is such a huge way to learn, for sure. Um, so you get the finished product completed, right? After all these iterations and all these improvements you made, you finally get it done. So what was the process like getting it out on the market and selling it?
So it's an interesting product because it's not a consumer product. You know, it's something that everybody uses every day, but it's not something that people buy themselves. You don't go to Amazon and buy bottles. You get your prescriptions or you get your Tylenol, you know, but it all comes in a bottle. So our customers are B2B. Customers are businesses, pharmaceutical companies or pharmacies. So our initial approach was licensing. It was license the technology. And we had some success in the licensing world, but we found that companies, they move slow. Like the bigger the companies, the slower they move. And being small allows you to be more nimble. You're able to move faster. And my lights just went off. But so I found that during the licensing, we were moving slow. A lot of bureaucratic things occur, you know, so after our licensing contracts came up, we didn't renew them. And we're like, yeah, we could do it ourselves. So we met manufacturers, started working with the manufacturer, you know, to rev up and do it ourselves at a faster rate and be in control of our own destiny, instead of depending on a licensing partner for that.
So
it's been a process.
so you basically, went directly to selling to whether it's the pharmaceutical companies or pharmacies and just cut out the middleman? Is that what you did?
That's currently what we're doing. Yep. We wanted a big thing. I wanted also manufacturing to be in the US. So if you license, you're kind of dependent on them wherever they manufacture. You know, so that was a big thing. I wanted to keep it in the US and be in control at the speed and pace and not getting bogged down with anything that's happening within a company that you have no control over. So once we decided to self-manufacture, found a manufacturer and working with them to produce final product and rev up the capacity needed to produce prescription vials at a high rate and a low price point.
Okay. And so that's currently where you are right now in the journey, right? As far as launching this and selling it.
That's where we are, revving up that production to fulfill pharmacy throughout the nation.
Okay. And what's the response been like from that world?
Been great. We've been, you know, there's the consumers and the businesses, the pharmacies. The pharmacies, you know, they both have different questions, wants and needs, you know. So we're designed it out, like I said, simplicity. So get that price point to an area that there's no financial burden to a pharmacy to adopt. So we are equally at cost as any other prescription vial out there. And then from the consumer side, so that satisfies the business point. From the consumers, we wanted to do a lot of consumer facing stuff and kind of educate the consumers about SnapSlide, what we're doing. And that response has been great. We launched our social media to the public in May of this year. And since that time, we were over 23,000 followers already. So the message is resonating and I'm excited.
Wow. Okay. And so, like you said, it was 7 years ago you started on this journey, and now you're getting it out there in the market, and basically it's in consumers' hands, and businesses are buying it, and you're continuing to grow the business that way.
Yep, currently we'll be out at the early 2025 Q1. So we got partnerships aligned right now with pharmacies. Now it's working up the production to satisfy that volume. There's about 4 billion prescription vials out there in the US. So the production capacity that we need takes time to build that production. So that's what we're at now, we're building that production so we could start satisfying the orders that we have to the pharmacies across the nation.
Okay. Amazing. All right. And so with you getting this out there in 2025, what's next from there?
Over-the-counter drugs, like aspirin. Aspirin's a huge one. Aspirin always bothered me because it's in a standard push and turn bottle, but it's one of the few drugs. Aspirin is a great medication. You know, it's not just a painkiller, but it also an antiplatelet in your blood. So a lot of people that have cardiovascular disease, they're taking aspirin. You had a stroke, probably going to be an aspirin. But if 80% of stroke patients are on an aspirin, or the stroke patients are on an aspirin, and 80% of them have some form of hemiparesis, how are they accessing that aspirin? So I think aspirin's a big one that I want to pursue relatively quickly because I believe aspirin needs to be in a one-handed accessible package that's still trial resistant, obviously. So
Okay.
the over-the-counter market, Dave.
Wow. All right. And so you going through this process too, you had to get patents and learn that whole world as well?
A lot of patents. Yep. We have about 8 patents right now, both domestically and internationally, with several more on the horizon. They're pending or in the works. So always, the patent process never ends. You know, you get your first patent, great, but there's always improvements, other applications that also need a piggyback on that patent or an entirely new patent. So you're always keeping up with the patents, and I don't think that part of the journey will ever end, is the patent process. So you always got to keep up on that.
Wow. All right. So looking back on your journey too, right? Like from when you started, didn't know what you were going to do. You just knew you were going to do something, invent something. And then, after all this experience and the mission and developing this product and everything you've gone through and you're about to really launch, um, with a fully scaled production, like what do you think's the most important lesson that you've learned on this entrepreneurial journey?
Good question. The most important lesson is never, ever, ever give up. An unwavering commitment, not depending on what others say. Necessary. You got to listen to people. It's important to listen, but don't take what they say as gospel. It's strange how people, for whatever reason, they might want to knock you off track for whatever reason. And go with your gut. Your gut's telling you that something could be done, that you feel that there is a market for something, that your solution does help people, or if it is needed. And everybody be telling you no, but if you feel it in your gut, most likely you're right. So that would be the biggest lesson I learned, that listen to yourself. Listen to what your gut's telling you. Unwavering commitment and never give up.
Well said. All right. So Rocky, people want to get in touch with you, learn more about SnapSlide, or get in touch to figure out if there's ways to partner. What's the best way people can reach out to you?
Two best ways: website snapslide.com, SNAPSLIDE, one word, snapslide.com, and then check us out on Facebook. Follow us, SnapSlide as well, on Facebook.
All right, and we'll link all that in the show notes for everyone. All right.
Cool.
Well, Rocky, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate the time, and congrats on how far you've come on the journey, and best of luck with the launch.
Hey, appreciate it.